There comes a point in some people's lives where they just stop. Stop justifying their choices. Stop over-explaining their decisions. Stop sending the long text that breaks down exactly why they did what they did. And from the outside, people call it coldness. They call it ego. They call it not caring anymore. But psychology tells a completely different story. Because that shift, that moment when someone stops explaining themselves, isn't a personality flaw. It's actually one of the most significant signs of psychological growth a person can go through. And if you've either started doing this yourself or you know someone who has, this video is going to show you exactly what's happening beneath the surface, what the brain is actually doing, why it happens, and why the people who judge it the most are usually the ones who triggered it. If you want psychology broken down like this, real insights, no textbook language, no fluff, hit that like button and subscribe to Psychology Decode right now. I'm trying to help 1 million people understand their own minds, and every single subscriber gets me one step closer. So hit subscribe and let's keep going. Here's what most people don't understand about over-explaining. It feels like honesty. It feels like communication. Like you're being open, being transparent, giving people the context they need to understand you. But a lot of the time, and this is the part nobody says out loud, over-explaining isn't really about communication at all. It's about fear. It's the deep, exhausting fear that if you don't justify yourself thoroughly enough, people will think badly of you, judge you, withdraw their approval. And so you explain. And then explain the explanation. And then follow up to make sure they understood. Have you ever typed a message, deleted it, retyped it, made it longer, read it back, worried it still sounded wrong, and sent it anyway with your stomach in knots? That's not communication. That's anxiety wearing the costume of communication. And it comes from something psychologists call an external locus of control, which is just a way of saying you've handed the remote control of your self-worth to other people. Their reaction becomes your verdict. Their understanding becomes your value. And the thing is, that system is absolutely exhausting. Because you can never explain enough. There's always another angle you didn't cover. Another person who still doesn't get it. Another situation where your reasoning gets twisted into something you didn't mean. You spend enormous energy managing how you're perceived, and it never quite works. And you never quite feel settled. Stop here for a second. Because this is the part most videos skip entirely. The people who stop explaining themselves aren't the ones who stopped caring what people think. Research from the University of Waterloo published in 2021 found that individuals with higher psychological maturity actually remain deeply aware of how others perceive them. They just no longer treat that perception as something they're irresponsible for managing. That's the difference, not indifference, clarity. They stopped explaining not because they gave up, but because they finally understood something fundamental. Your explanation will only land with someone who was already willing to understand you, and no amount of words will create that willingness in someone who doesn't have it. Let me tell you about someone named Marcus. 29 years old, graphic designer, living in Atlanta. For most of his 20s, Marcus was the guy who responded to every criticism with a 5-paragraph defense. Someone misread his tone in a message. He'd write 3 messages clarifying it. Someone questioned his career choice. He'd spend the whole dinner justifying it. He wasn't being defensive, he told himself. He was just making sure people understood. But one day his therapist asked him something that stopped him cold. She said, "Who exactly are you trying to convince?" And Marcus realized, it wasn't them. It had never been them. He was trying to convince himself that his choices were okay. He was outsourcing his self-validation to anyone who'd listen, because somewhere along the way he'd stopped trusting his own judgment. When he saw that, everything shifted. That's the hidden mechanism behind this whole pattern. Over-explaining is often self-doubt in disguise. When you genuinely trust your own decisions, you don't feel compelled to build a legal case for them. You might share your reasoning with people you trust, but you don't feel the desperate need for the verdict to come back in your favor. The explanation compulsion. That itch you feel when someone misunderstands you and you have to fix it immediately. That's your nervous system trying to regulate itself through external validation. It's your brain saying, "I don't feel safe unless they approve." But here's where it gets really interesting. The myth is that people who stop explaining themselves have become arrogant or dismissive. The reality is almost always the opposite. A 2019 study from the University of Michigan found that people who show reduced need for external validation consistently score higher on measures of self-awareness and emotional stability. Not lower. They're not less connected to others. They're more connected to themselves. And that internal foundation means they no longer need every conversation to end with someone nodding in agreement. Now let's talk about the signs. Because you might be in the middle of this shift right now and not even have a name for what you're experiencing. The first sign is that you've stopped over-apologizing. You used to say sorry constantly. For your opinion, for taking up space, for asking a question, for existing in a way that inconvenienced someone. And lately, you notice you're apologizing less. Not because you've become callous, but because you've started to feel the difference between genuine remorse and reflexive self-erasure. That distinction is huge. Here's another one. You've started letting misunderstandings sit without immediately trying to fix them. Someone gets the wrong impression of you, and instead of diving in to correct the record, you pause. You ask yourself, does this person's opinion of this situation actually matter? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes, and this is new, the answer is no, and you let it go. That ability to tolerate being misunderstood without panicking is a marker of real psychological growth. The third sign is something most people completely miss. You've started feeling a strange kind of loneliness in conversations where you used to feel connected. Because now that you're no longer performing, no longer explaining, no longer managing, some relationships start to feel a little hollow, like the connection was built on your overfunctioning, not on genuine mutual understanding. That's disorienting. But it's also revealing. A fourth sign is that your boundaries have gotten quieter. They used to come with explanations attached. I can't come to that because of this reason and also that reason, and I hope you understand. Now a boundary sometimes just sounds like, that doesn't work for me. No footnotes, no apology tour. Just the truth, plainly stated. And you've noticed people react more strongly to that, which tells you something important about why you used to over-explain in the first place. Here's what not to do with all of this. Don't use "I don't explain myself anymore" as armor. There's a version of this growth that gets weaponized, where stopping explanation becomes a way to avoid accountability, to shut down legitimate conversations, to seem unbothered when you're actually just defended. That's not psychological health. That's a wall with good branding. Real growth means you can be open when openness is warranted. You've just stopped being open on demand, for everyone, as a default setting. So what do you actually do with this? Start by noticing when the urge to explain comes from fear versus when it comes from genuine desire to connect. Ask yourself, am I explaining this because it matters to the relationship, or because I need them to see me a certain way? That one question will tell you almost everything. Then practice what therapists call tolerating the discomfort of being misunderstood. Start small. Let one small misreading go uncorrected this week. Notice that you survive it. Notice that the relationship, more often than not, survives it too. And over time, your nervous system starts to learn what Marcus learned in that therapist's office. The verdict was never theirs to give in the first place. I want to hear from you right now. Drop your answer in the comments below. Have you ever been through this shift, where you just stopped feeling the need to explain yourself to everyone? Or are you still in the thick of it? Tell me where you are. I read every single one. If you've ever felt like there was something wrong with you for being exhausted by the constant need to justify yourself, there isn't. Brain was doing what brains do when they haven't yet learned that their own judgment is enough. That's not a flaw. That's a starting point. And the fact that you're here, asking these questions, paying this kind of attention to your own patterns, that's not nothing. That's everything. You are not broken. You are becoming someone who no longer needs to prove that. Thank you for watching this one all the way through. Next week we're going to talk about something that connects directly to this. Why some people feel guilty for having needs at all. Where that guilt actually comes from, and what psychology says it takes to finally let it go. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you're there when it drops.